God rested on the seventh day, not because he was tired, but because he knew we would be tired. God sanctified the seventh day. That means he set it apart for holy use. Now the word sanctified is the word also used by God for the marriage ceremony, when one woman is set apart or sanctified for one specific man. Let us use a very simple illustration. Let's suppose a man gets married. The woman he marries has 6 sisters, and after the ceremony he's waiting in the car getting ready to go on honeymoon. And one of his sisters slips in beside him and says, "Let's go." And he looks at her amazed and responds, "I didn't marry you, I married your sister." Her reply is, "What difference does it make? I'm one of the 7. Friend, obviously it makes a difference. To the married couple, it certainly does. There's one specific sister who is sanctified, set apart for him. All women are not the same, and likewise, all days of the week are not the same. The Sabbath was created by God approximately 2,300 years before the existence of the Jewish race. The Sabbath was given to our first parents, Adam and Eve, in the Garden of Eden. The Sabbath was set aside at creation for his people in every age, specifically as a symbol, an eternal symbol of God's creative power. When Adam and Eve left the garden, the Sabbath remained intact as a reminder of God's eternal love. And throughout both the Old and the New Testament, the Sabbath is a sign between God and his people. Before he gave the Israelites the 10 Commandments law on Mount Sinai, they were already keeping the Sabbath of creation. In Exodus 16, now keep in mind that this is before the law was given to them at Mount Sinai, which we find in Exodus 20. In Exodus 16, we read the remarkable story of the falling of the manna. The Lord said in Exodus 16, verse 26, 6 days shall you gather it, but on the 7th day, which is a Sabbath, there will be none. God worked a miracle for Israel. He met their needs by raining bread down from heaven. And this bread or manna fell every day except on Sabbaths. And if the Israelites gathered more than they could eat, the leftover portion spoiled. When the Israelites went out to gather manna on the Sabbath, God said in verse 28, "How long do you refuse to keep my commandments and my laws?" On Mount Sinai, God wrote the Sabbath commandment with his own finger on tables of stone. He didn't write these commandments in the sand to be washed away. He did not write them on parchment to be consumed in fire. God did not write the Sabbath command on a little piece of paper that could be lost or burned or just disintegrate. God wrote on tables of stone. God wrote the law to endure forever. God didn't even entrust Moses to write it. God didn't even entrust one of the other prophets to write it. God wrote the law personally. Now, friend, let me ask you something. If in the Bible there's only one set of laws written with God's own finger, if God wrote them on tables of stone so that they would last, shall we, can we, dare we turn our backs on the eternal law of God written personally by himself? The Bible says in Exodus 20, verses 8 to 11, "Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy." Now you and I can keep holy only that which God makes holy. Human beings can't make anything holy. God made the Sabbath holy. He blessed the Sabbath at creation. And let's ponder the first word, remember. Why did God say remember? He knew we would forget. He knew in an age of evolution, men and women generally would, and you and I specifically could forget the Sabbath. So God said, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. God is saying, whatever you do, don't forget the Sabbath. God is calling you and me back to his eternal sign of creation. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the 7th day is the Sabbath of the Lord your God. In it you shall do no work. Notice he doesn't say a seventh day is the Sabbath. God says the seventh day is the Sabbath. And a good illustration is the day before your birthday and the day after your birthday do not commemorate the day you were born. The first day, the third day, or the fourth day do not commemorate the birth of earth by the Creator God. And God tells us why we are to worship on the seventh day. In Exodus 20 verse 11, for in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea and all that in them is, and rested the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it. So the Ten Commandments law actually quotes Genesis and leads us back to when God created the earth. The Sabbath was never an exclusively Jewish institution. It was given for all humanity at creation. The commandment, thou shalt not kill, is not only for the Jews. Just as the commandment, thou shalt not worship any graven image, is not only for the Jews, so the Sabbath is not exclusively a Jewish Sabbath. It was given to our first parents long before the existence of the Jewish nation. It was given for all Old Testament and New Testament believers. The Bible says the Sabbath is made for man. In other words, for all humanity, everywhere on earth. And Isaiah 56 verses 6 and 7 reads, everyone who keeps from defiling the Sabbath, I will bring to my holy mountain. Now, what is God's holy mountain? It's the New Jerusalem. It's heaven. He says, everyone who keeps from defiling the Sabbath, I will bring to my holy mountain, and make them joyful in my house of prayer, for my house shall be called a house of prayer for all nations. So God is saying, all nations will one day worship around my throne in the New Jerusalem each Sabbath. Now, throughout the Old Testament times, the Sabbath was God's everlasting sign for all of his people. And we read in Ezekiel 20 verse 12, moreover I also gave them my Sabbaths, to be a sign between them and me, that they might know that I am the Lord who sanctifies them. The Sabbath is not only a sign that God created us, it is a sign that he can recreate our hearts. And when I come to worship him on Sabbaths, I say, God, you are the all-powerful Creator. Please recreate my heart today.